Ukraine is going to become part of NATO. That's the big story right now. We just heard from Tony Blinken. He doesn't care what you think. He doesn't care how much it's going to cost, apparently. He's going to make this happen some way, somehow. The Secretary of State saying that on the 75th anniversary of NATO, we're going to make sure Ukraine is part of it. Take a listen.
Support for Ukraine, the determination of every country represented here at NATO remains rock solid. We will do everything that we can. Allies will do everything that they can to ensure that Ukraine has what it needs to continue to deal with Russia's ongoing aggression against Ukraine, an aggression that gets worse with every passing day. Ukraine will become a member of NATO. Our purpose at the summit is to help build a bridge to that membership and to create a clear pathway for Ukraine moving forward.
But, of course, we believe that Ukraine deserves to be a member of NATO and that this should happen sooner rather than later.
Okay, he's like, what's taking you guys so long? It's got to happen sooner rather than later. You heard it there from the Ukrainian foreign minister. You know, a lot of Americans are like, I'm not so sure about this. Is this like going to set us up in some kind of really dangerous scenario? You know, Putin has his line drawn in the sand. Apparently we have our line drawn in the sand, and there's not a whole lot of diplomacy going down. If there were, you know, we wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. Let me be very, very clear on that. When you think about sort of the avalanche of stupidity going on in Washington, you consider the fact that they had an idea. Let me just say, like, they had an idea. What was one of the first things that Tony Blinken did when he got the job? What was one of the first things that Joe Biden did when he got the job? They started talking about how NATO was so important, so important, so important. Very different kind of tune being sung than the one that we had heard from Donald Trump, which was, hey, NATO, you got to pay your fair share. Didn't you agree to pay 2% of GDP, Germany? Where's your 2%? You're not paying anything. America's the only one paying stuff. So guess what, guys? You better get on board or we're not going to pay anymore. So that was what Trump was saying. Instead, Biden's like, can I give you a check? How much do you want? Okay, done. Well, until he ran into a few problems. Funny thing happened on the way to the forum. We can talk about that. But the reality of the situation is that from a diplomatic standpoint, Putin was hearing exactly what he wanted. Putin. Sorry, that's my New Hampshire accent coming out. It happens with mittens and kittens as well. So sorry, Putin. It's like he was hearing what he needed to hear from Donald Trump. So he wasn't as frightened. But the minute Biden shows up, he talks the way he talks, tough talking. They send the president of France over there to try and calm Putin down. It didn't work. And the next thing you know, we're in this really significant military scuffle. I say we're technically not in it, but our money's in it. And we have our allegiance and we have promised our allegiance. And so this is where it just gets really messy. And I have my doubts. I don't have this clip. I don't think I have this clip unless Drew's like a magician. But I've played this for you before of John McCain saying 10 years ago, ladies and gentlemen, on the House floor, on the Senate floor, saying that Tony Blinken was not somebody that he could actually vote for Deputy Secretary of State. He couldn't vote for the guy. You know why? Because Tony Blinken would risk American lives. Tony Blinken could cost American lives because Tony Blinken had a vision and he was so hell-bent on whatever vision it was. He wanted to get out of Afghanistan. And this is 10 years ago. McCain was talking about this. 10 years ago, McCain was talking about this, and he had a warning, regardless of what you think about McCain. I know that some of you aren't necessarily president of the fan club, but listen to this. It's actually pretty ominous.
Madam President, I rise to discuss my opposition to the pending vote concerning Mr. Tony Blinken, who is not only unqualified, but in fact, in my view, one of the worst selections of a very bad lot that this president has chosen. I hope that many of my colleagues will understand that not often do I come to the floor to oppose a nomination of the President of the United States, because I believe that elections have consequences. In this case, this individual has actually been dangerous to America and to the young men and women who are fighting and serving it. Let's just review some of the elements in particular, and Mr. Blinken's role in conceptualizing and furthering it. U.S. foreign policy is in a shambles. It's at best a strategic and at worst anti-strategic. I'll move on to Afghanistan. Mr. Blinken said, quote, "We've been very clear. We've been consistent. The war will be concluded by the end of 2014. We have a timetable, and that timetable will not change." This is why I'm so worried about him being in the position that he's in. Because if they stick to that timetable, I am telling my colleagues that we will see the replay of Iraq all over again. We must leave a stabilizing force behind of a few thousand troops, or we will see again what we saw in Iraq.
Oh my gosh. It was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. It's like history just keeps on repeating itself. And we're in a really, really bad spot. A really bad spot with a team that doesn't understand what's at stake, for goodness sakes. You know what? If they understood, if they comprehended, if they had the vision, if they could play chess instead of checkers, they would understand not to provoke Putin at that time. They would have understood that they couldn't just get out of Afghanistan the way they did, because, you know, they're committed to this timetable that they'll blame Donald Trump for. But I'll tell you, Donald Trump would have left a few people behind, stabilizing forces. So error number one. I mean, I don't think I've ever cried on live TV. I was watching this stuff with you from Afghanistan. Leslie knows. Remember how emotional I was getting? I mean, it was awful. And preventable. That's what was so disgusting about it all. And then fast forward, we get the mess that we've got there in Ukraine, because they don't know how to talk to people apparently at our State Department. They don't know how to calm somebody like Putin down. And then you start to wonder, like, is it because they don't want to? Like, is there a business in this? I mean, I hate to be that cynical. I really do. And without getting all, political science on you, sometimes I do that. Go back and watch my shows about George Kennan. We write about that at 76 Research too. I mean, Kennan, who was the original diplomat to the USSR during the Cold War. I mean, Kennan was like, what are you guys doing with this NATO thing? Why do you keep expanding? You're going to have a real problem. Like, you're going to be right where you were all over again. Unless, of course, the design was to help keep a State Department going that didn't have anything to do after the Cold War was won, right? I mean, they're all sitting around twiddling their thumbs. You look at the stock prices of Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman, they've been left for dead, right? And then all of a sudden, what do you know? They start perking up, especially around 2014 when the CIA apparently put its own little mission right in there in Afghanistan. Didn't tell us until a few weeks ago when it all came out in a 22-page report in the New York Times PDF, 22 pages. Yeah, they've had a special op going on. But the deal was, you know what? You can't actually escalate it. They had an op going on. They were trying to measure and determine how truthful Ukraine really would be with us. We didn't entirely trust Ukraine for a variety of reasons. Understandably, I don't know why we trust him now. For goodness sakes, the defense minister keeps siphoning off. Oh, that was the old defense minister, right? And his deputy. They're gone now. We got rid of them. But they were siphoning off all this money. And so, consequently, we've had a history of issues with Ukraine prior to this. We were trying to test them out, figure it out. CIA's been there 10 years. And now look where we are. So when you think about these polls, ladies and gentlemen, when you think about the success that Trump is seeing, it's not just the economy. it's not just the border. It's diplomacy as well. The idea of having some common sense. I mean, common sense would have told you, for goodness sakes, guys, you think you're going to go into some battle with Russia. All of Europe is relying on Russia for natural gas. Nord Stream pipeline, right? 1 and 2. Well, then do you really think it's the best timing to say we're going to cut off all U.S. energy supplies? No more drilling in the USA. We can just all go green and get EVs for 60 grand a pop. I mean, it's like the left hand doesn't talk to the right hand. The stupidity is overwhelming. And so, yes, you need some common sense. You need some common sense, like somebody coming in from the outside and saying, yeah, gee, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. Like Nelson Peltz telling Disney, yeah, it's not working for me. I mean, I like women and everything, but do I really have to see a movie with all women? I mean, crazy. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on things. That's my 2 cents. I think that this has gotten out of control in ways that it absolutely, positively shouldn't have. Do you agree? I mean, look, we want the best for Ukraine, right? But we're also, I think in this camp, we're realists. And right now, he does not have the political capital to be able to pull this off. Biden, that is. And Antony Blinken. I mean, they just don't have it. They don't got it. You got a messed up House that's full of infighting. You get Republicans, unfortunately, that are leaving, and shame on them. I believe when you sign up for a job, you do that job. You don't just, fly the coop as soon as the going gets tough. But that's what so many of them have done. And I often wonder where they promise this, that, or the other, right? To get out of town quick. You wonder what the other side is offering. They're threatening, oh, you're going to be canceled. There's going to be nothing to you. Your career's going to be over, like Ronna McDaniels. There was a big article the other day in a publication called Mediaite on that, saying like she has no chances, none at all. And I was like, oh, maybe, or maybe that was also her lawyer's spin, because they're trying to really get some money out of NBC, and they should. I mean, she signed a contract. And then NBC threw her under the bus because they get a bunch of weaklings for anchors that are actually apparently pretty powerful and have more say than management. That's when you know the inmates are running the asylum.